My husband and his precious female best friend mistook my silence for submission. They believed I would swallow my pride just to keep a fake peace. But they were wrong. When Elias demanded I apologize to Sloan, he triggered a time bomb. I agreed, but my apology is being presented alongside a lawyer, bank statements, and a medical secret that will bury 2 lives in a heartbeat. Welcome to the ruin of traitors. My name is Amara Kingswell. I am 34 years old, and in the high-stakes world of Chicago real estate and luxury design, my name is synonymous with control. I own Kingswell Interiors, a firm that caters to the kind of clientele who do not ask the price of Italian marble or custom-milled French oak. I spend my days bringing order to chaos, transforming empty shells into sanctuaries of warmth and logic. I am known for my sharp eye, my unshakable composure, and my ability to spot a structural flaw long before the foundation cracks. It is ironic, then, that the most dangerous fracture in my life was widening right under my feet, hidden beneath the polished floorboards of my own marriage. I prided myself on my independence. I was not the kind of woman who needed a partner to complete her, but I wanted one, and for 5 years, I believed I had found the perfect complement in Elias Thorne. At 36, Elias was the director of marketing at OmniStream, a tech giant that practically ran the city's digital infrastructure. He was charming, ambitious, and projected the image of the devoted husband with the precision of a well-executed ad campaign. We were the couple everyone invited to galas, the duo that looked effortlessly compatible in photographs. I loved him. I loved him with a fierce, protective loyalty that made me overlook the small, jagged edges of his personality. I smoothed them over, just as I would smooth over a rough edge on a piece of granite, telling myself that no one is perfect. But every marriage has a third component, a shadow that lingers in the periphery. Ours was named Sloan Vane. Sloan was Elias's best friend from university. That was the title. At least, in reality, she was a professional victim, a woman who had weaponized fragility into an art form. She was always in crisis, always needing a shoulder to cry on, and that shoulder was invariably my husband's. She had a husband of her own, a quiet, gentle architect named Julian. But Sloan treated Julian like a piece of furniture necessary but easily ignored. She preferred the spotlight of my husband's attention. For years, I tolerated her. I tolerated the late-night phone calls where she sobbed about her anxiety. I tolerated the way she would touch Elias's arm just a little too long when she laughed. I tolerated the way she would look at me with wide, innocent doe eyes while making passive-aggressive comments about my workaholism, implying that I was neglecting Elias while she, the good friend, was picking up the slack. I tolerated it because I trusted Elias. I believed him when he said I was the love of his life, and she was just a damaged bird he felt obligated to help. That tolerance ended on the night of our 5th wedding anniversary. We were hosting a cocktail party at our penthouse in the Gold Coast district. It was an intimate affair. Just 50 of our closest friends and business associates. I had curated every detail, from the floral arrangements of white orchids to the jazz quartet playing softly in the corner. I was wearing a vintage black velvet gown, feeling powerful and elegant, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering expanse of Lake Michigan. Elias was by my side, his hand on the small of my back, playing the role of the adoring husband perfectly. Then the elevator doors opened, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. Sloan walked in. She had not been on the guest list. I had explicitly told Elias that I wanted this night to be about us, without the drama that inevitably trailed in her wake. Yet, here she was, and she was not wearing cocktail attire. Sloan was wearing a floor-length gown of white lace and silk. It had a sweetheart neckline and a train that pooled slightly on the floor. It was, for all intents and purposes, a wedding dress. In a room full of guests wearing black tie and evening colors, she stood out like a flare. She looked beautiful, in that fragile, waif-like way she cultivated. But the message was violent in its clarity. She was asserting dominance. She was rewriting the narrative of my anniversary to make herself the bride. The room went quiet. I felt Elias stiffen beside me, but he did not move to stop her. He did not look angry. Sloan floated toward us, a beaming, vapid smile plastered on her face. "Happy anniversary," she squealed, her voice piercing the sophisticated murmur of the party. She threw her arms around Elias first, burying her face in his neck, lingering there for 5 uncomfortable seconds before turning to me. "Amara. Oh my God, I am so sorry I am late. I just had to come and celebrate you two." I stared at her, my glass of red wine steady in my hand. "Sloan," I said, my voice cool. "You are wearing white?" She looked down at her dress and giggled, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Oh, it is just cream, silly. Do not be so old-fashioned. Besides, I wanted to match the theme. It is a celebration of love. Right?" She stepped closer, invading my personal space. In her hand was a large glass of Pinot Noir. I saw it happen in slow motion. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a split second, the mask of the bubbly friend slipped, revealing a flash of pure, cold malice. She stumbled. It was a theatrical, exaggerated stumble, the kind a bad actress performs in a soap opera. Her arm jerked forward, the entire contents of her wineglass launched onto my chest. The cold liquid soaked through the velvet instantly, running down my bodice and staining the expensive fabric a dark, bloody crimson. The gasp from the room was audible. "Oh no!" Sloan shrieked, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God! Amara, I am so clumsy. I am so sorry." She reached out with a cocktail napkin, making a show of trying to dab at my chest. But I caught her wrist. My grip was hard enough to make her flinch. "Stop," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The room fell deadly silent. "It was an accident," Sloan wailed, tears already welling up in her eyes on command. "I tripped Elias. Tell her I tripped." I released her wrist and took a step back. I did not look at the stain. I looked only at her face. "You did not trip, Sloan, and this is not cream. It is bridal white. You came to my anniversary party uninvited, dressed like a bride, and you just ruined my gown." "Amara, please," Elias hissed beside me, his voice low and warning. "Do not make a scene." I turned my gaze to my husband. "I am not the one making a scene, Elias. She is, and I am done." I looked back at Sloan. "Get out." Sloan's jaw dropped. "What?" "You heard me," I said, enunciating every word. "Leave my house, now, or go into the guest room. Take off that ridiculous costume and put on something appropriate that I will lend you. Those are your options, but you will not stand in my living room looking like a rejected bride and smelling like a vineyard." Sloan burst into loud, heaving sobs. She turned to Elias, clutching his lapels. "Elias? Are you going to let her talk to me like that? I just wanted to celebrate with you. She is being so mean." Elias looked at the guests, who were watching with a mix of shock and fascination. His perfect image was cracking. He looked at me, and his eyes were cold. "Amara, you are overreacting. It was just an accident. Go change your dress, and let's calm down." "No," I said. "She leaves, or I do." Elias clenched his jaw. He looked at Sloan, who was trembling like a leaf in a storm, and then at me. Standing tall despite the wine soaking my skin, he made his choice. "Sloan," he said gently, guiding her toward the door. "Come on, I will walk you to your car." He left me there. He walked out of our anniversary party with the woman who had just assaulted me, leaving me to face our guests alone. I did not cry. I signaled the waiters to bring fresh champagne, apologized smoothly to the room for the interruption, and went upstairs to change. I spent the rest of the night smiling, hosting, and pretending that my heart wasn't turning into a block of ice. Elias did not return for 2 hours. When the last guest had finally departed and the cleaning crew was clearing the debris of the party, Elias walked in. He smelled of her perfume. He loosened his tie, throwing his jacket onto the sofa with a violence that made me flinch internally. I hope you are happy, he said, his voice dripping with venom. I was standing by the kitchen island, drinking a glass of water. I set it down slowly. I am not particularly happy. No, my husband disappeared for 2 hours at our own party to comfort the woman who ruined my dress. She was hysterical. Amara, Elias shouted, slamming his hand onto the marble counter. You humiliated her in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how fragile she is right now? She and Julian are having problems. She feels alone, and she just wanted to be part of our happiness. And you acted like a total bitch. I stared at him. The gaslighting was so brazen it was almost impressive. He was twisting reality in real time, trying to make me doubt the evidence of my own eyes. She wore a wedding dress, Elias, I said calmly. She threw wine on me. It was a cocktail dress, he argued, and it was an accident. You are so paranoid. You have always been jealous of her, haven't you? You cannot stand that I have a female friend who actually understands me. You are so petty. Amara, it is unattractive. Petty, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. I am the one who keeps this life running. Elias, I am the one who built this home, and I am the one who has tolerated her disrespect for 5 years. She respects you, Elias countered. She is terrified of you, and tonight you proved her right. You are cold. You are unfeeling. God, sometimes I wonder if you even have a heart. He walked around the kitchen, pacing like a caged animal. This has to stop. I cannot deal with this jealousy anymore. It is suffocating. You are driving a wedge between us, not her. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes narrowing. He had decided on his play. He crossed his arms, assuming the posture of a disappointed parent scolding a naughty child. I want you to fix this, he said. I blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. You broke it. You fix it. I want you to apologize to her. I felt the blood drain from my face. You want me to apologize to the woman who came into my home and humiliated me? I want you to apologize for your reaction, Elias said smoothly, his tone shifting from anger to a condescending logic. I want you to show her that you are the bigger person. I want you to host a dinner. Here, this Friday. Just us, Sloan and Julian. You will cook something nice. You will invite them over, and you will apologize for overreacting. You will tell her you value her friendship and that you want to start over. And if I refuse? I asked. Elias shrugged, a casual gesture that carried a terrifying weight. Then I do not know. Amara, I really do not. If you cannot accept the people who are important to me, if you are going to be this toxic, then maybe we need to rethink where this marriage is going. I cannot be with someone who is so cruel. There it was, the ultimatum. He was leveraging our entire marriage, our 5 years of life together, to force me into submission to his mistress, because that is what she was. I knew it then, with a sudden, crystal clarity that cut through the confusion. Friends do not do this. Husbands do not do this. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the handsome face I had fallen in love with, the strong jawline, the expressive eyes, but for the first time, I saw what was underneath. I saw the arrogance. I saw the entitlement, and as I hesitated, pretending to struggle with my pride, I saw it. A smirk. It was tiny, barely a twitch of the corner of his mouth. It was gone in a second, replaced by his mask of righteous indignation. But I saw it. It was the look of a man who knows he has won. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was so desperate to keep him, so afraid of losing the perfect image of our marriage, that I would swallow glass if he told me it was sugar. He thought I was weak. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, decisive sound of a lock clicking into place. The grief I had felt moments ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the same calm I felt when I walked into a dilapidated building and saw exactly how to tear it down and rebuild it. He wanted a performance I would give him, the greatest performance of his life. I lowered my head, letting my shoulders slump as if in defeat. I took a deep, shaky breath. "You are right," I whispered. Elias's posture relaxed instantly. The tension left his frame, replaced by a smug satisfaction. "I knew you would see reason, babe. You are a good woman deep down. You just get intense." I looked up at him, keeping my face carefully neutral, hiding the fire that was beginning to burn in my gut. "I do not want to lose you, Elias. If this is what it takes to make things right, I will do it." "That is my girl," he said, walking over to kiss my forehead. He did not notice that I did not lean into him. He did not notice that my skin was cold. "Make it nice. Okay, top shelf. Let's really show them we are moving past this." "Oh, I will," I said, my voice steady. "I will organize a dinner this Friday. I will invite Sloan and Julian, and I promise you, Elias, I will make it an evening she will never forget." "Good," he said, turning away to head upstairs, already dismissing me now that he had gotten what he wanted. "I am going to shower. Do not stay up too late." I watched him walk away. I watched the man I had vowed to cherish climb the stairs to our bedroom, oblivious to the fact that he had just signed his own warrant. "Friday," I said softly to the empty room. I had 4 days. 4 days to investigate, 4 days to prepare, 4 days to turn my grief into ammunition. Elias wanted an apology. I would give him one. I would give him an apology wrapped in legal documents, garnished with bank statements, and served on a platter of absolute ruin. I picked up my phone. It was midnight, but I did not care. I unlocked the screen and stared at the wallpaper, a photo of Elias and me in Paris. Smiling, happy, oblivious. I deleted it. Then I opened my calendar and marked Friday with a single word: endgame. "You want a show, Elias," I murmured, turning off the lights in the kitchen, plunging the penthouse into darkness. "I hope you are ready for the finale." The silence in the master bedroom was heavy, pressing down on my chest like a physical weight. Beside me, Elias slept. His breathing was deep and rhythmic, the peaceful slumber of a man who believed he had won, a man who thought he had successfully managed his troublesome wife and secured his future. I lay rigid on my side of the California King mattress, staring at the ceiling where the shadows of the street lamps outside danced through the sheer curtains. I did not sleep. Sleep felt like a luxury I could no longer afford, a vulnerability I could not risk. My mind, usually so disciplined, was a chaotic storm of memories, replaying the last 2 years of my life on a loop, searching for the cracks I had missed. Hindsight is a cruel instrument. It takes the blurry, confusing moments of the past and sharpens them into agonizing clarity. I thought about the weekends Elias had spent away. He called them executive retreats or networking summits in places like Denver and Austin. I remembered how he would come home from those trips not exhausted, but energized, glowing with a vitality that I had foolishly attributed to professional success. I remembered the credit card statements I had glanced at and dismissed dinners at steakhouses for 2, charged to his business account, which he always explained away as wining and dining clients. I had trusted him. I had been so busy building my empire, so focused on the macro level of our success, that I had failed to notice the termites eating away at the floorboards. A voice from the past drifted into my head. It was my father, a man who had built the Kingswell fortune with steel nerves and zero illusions about human nature. Amara. He had told me a week before the cancer finally took him. Love is a feeling, but marriage is a contract. Never confuse the two. Protect the principle. People change, but greed is a constant. I had dismissed him then as a cynical old man hardened by business battles. I had thought my love for Elias was different, transcendent. Now, lying next to a man who had just coerced me into apologizing to his mistress, I realized my father had been the only one seeing clearly. The urge to know, to confirm the sickness rising in my gut, became overpowering. I turned my head slowly on the pillow. Elias was facing away from me, his phone resting on the nightstand, plugged into the charger. The little green light pulsed in the darkness. I moved with the stealth of a thief in my own bed. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and disconnected the cable. I brought the device closer to me, shielding the light with my body. I tapped the screen. It lit up, asking for a passcode. For 5 years. His passcode had been my birthday. It was a sweet, cliché gesture that I had always found endearing. I tapped in the numbers. Incorrect passcode. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried again, thinking I might have mistyped in my nervousness. I entered the digits slowly, deliberately. Incorrect passcode. Try again in 1 minute. I stared at the screen until it went black. It was a small thing, a digital wall, but it confirmed everything. He had changed the lock. He had built a fortress around his digital life because he knew there were things inside that would destroy him if I saw them. I placed the phone back on the nightstand exactly as I had found it, plugging the cable back in. I lay back down, my hands cold as ice. I waited for the sun. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I rose. I dressed in silence, choosing a sharp gray suit that felt like armor. I left a note on the kitchen counter saying I had an early site visit and would see him later. I could not look at him. If I looked at him, I might scream, and I was not ready to scream yet. I needed ammunition first. I drove to my office in the Loop, the city of Chicago waking up around me. The gray steel of the skyscrapers matched my mood. When I arrived at Kingswell Interiors, the office was empty. The staff would not arrive for another 2 hours. I locked the main door behind me and went straight to my private office. Bypassing the piles of fabric swatches and blueprints on my desk, I sat down at my computer and opened a secure browser. My hands hovered over the keyboard. 3 years ago, we had a problem with a cleaning service at the penthouse. Small items had gone missing: a silver picture frame, a pair of earrings. I had installed a high-end security system with hidden cameras in the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway. They were discreet, disguised as smoke detectors and motion sensors. After we fired that cleaning company, I had stopped checking the feed, but I had never deactivated the system. It recorded to a private cloud server that only I had access to. Elias did not know they existed. I had never told him, not out of malice, but because I handled the household security and he had never asked. I logged in. The interface loaded, showing a live feed of my empty living room. The morning sun was just hitting the sofa where Elias had sat last night, demanding I apologize. I clicked on the History tab. I began to scroll back. I looked for dates when I was out of town. 2 weeks ago, I had been in Milan for the Salone del Mobile, the most important furniture design fair in the world. I had been gone for 5 days. Elias had told me he would be working late and ordering takeout. Playing video games a bachelor week, he had called it. I found the footage from the first night of my trip. The timestamp read 7 in the evening. The front door opened. My breath caught in my throat. Elias walked in, carrying a bag of groceries, and right behind him, walking with the casual familiarity of someone who lived there, was Sloan. She was not a guest. She did not wait for him to invite her in. She walked past him, kicked off her shoes by the door, my door, and threw her purse onto my entryway console. I watched, mesmerized by the horror of it. "God, I am exhausted," Sloan said. The audio quality was crystal clear. She walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. She took out a bottle of sparkling water, my sparkling water, and took a swig directly from the bottle before putting it back. "Do you want me to start the pasta?" Elias asked, walking into the frame. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing the side of her neck. It was not a tentative kiss. It was the hungry, possessive touch of a lover. "Yeah, sure," Sloan said, leaning back into him. "But not too much garlic. You know how I get." I fast-forwarded. I watched them eat dinner at my table. I watched them watch a movie on my sofa. Her legs draped over his lap. I watched them turn off the lights and head upstairs to my bedroom. I felt physically ill. I grabbed the trash can under my desk and dry heaved, my body rejecting the reality on the screen. but I forced myself to sit back up. I had to see it all. I skipped to the next day. This footage was even worse. They were standing in the hallway, looking into the room I used as my home office. It was my sanctuary, filled with my sketches, my books, and the awards I had won over a decade of relentless hard work. Sloan was holding a cup of coffee, leaning against the doorframe, looking into the room with a critical sneer. "It is just so heavy," she said, gesturing with her free hand. "All this dark wood and these serious books, it has such bad energy. Elias, it feels oppressive, like a museum for an old person." Elias laughed, sipping his own coffee. "I know. Amara loves her dramatic aesthetic. She thinks it makes her look important." "It just makes the house feel cold," Sloan said. She walked into my room, and spun around. "You know what we should do when we finally get things settled." "Tell me," Elias said, leaning against the doorframe, watching her with adoration. "We should gut this room," Sloan declared. "Rip out these bookshelves, paint the walls a soft sage green, put down bamboo flooring. It would make a perfect yoga studio. I could finally have a space to breathe, somewhere to center myself." Elias smiled. "A yoga studio. I like that. It fits you better. Much more peaceful." "Right," Sloan beamed. "I can just picture it. We could put a big mirror on that wall. Maybe some plants in the corner. It would be our space. No more gloom." I froze the video. My finger hovered over the pause button. My knuckle white. They were not just sleeping together. They were erasing me. This was not a fling. This was a coup. They were standing in the house I had paid for, planning how to dismantle my life brick by brick. They were discussing the destruction of my career sanctuary as if it were a weekend DIY project. Sloan wanted to turn the space where I built my empire into a room where she could stretch and pretend to be spiritual. And Elias, my husband, the man who claimed to support my ambition, was agreeing with her. He was calling my taste oppressive. He was mocking the very success that paid for the roof over his head. The sheer entitlement was breathtaking. They were living in a fantasy world where I was merely an obstacle to be removed, a placeholder until they could execute their vision of a peaceful life on my dime. I sat back in my chair, the nausea fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The tears that had threatened to fall evaporated. My father was right. This was a contract, and Elias had breached it in the most fundamental way possible. I was not a wife anymore. I was a CEO dealing with a hostile takeover, and I knew exactly how to handle hostile takeovers. I reached for my desk phone and dialed a number I had not used in years. It rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "Amara Kingswell," the voice said. "To what do I owe the pleasure? It has been a long time." "Hello, Marcus," I said. My voice was steady, void of any emotion. Marcus was a private investigator, a former federal agent who charged a fortune because he was the best in Chicago. He was discreet, ruthless, and loyal only to the check. "I have a job for you." "I am listening," Marcus said. I could hear the sound of a lighter clicking in the background. "I need a full forensic audit of a person's life," I said. "Financials, movements, communications, digital footprint. I need you to go deep. I want to know what they ate for breakfast 3 weeks ago. I want to know where every cent of money has gone in the last 2 years, and I need it done fast." "Who is the target?" Marcus asked. "2 targets," I corrected. "Elias Thorne and Sloan Vane." There was a brief pause on the line. Marcus knew Elias. He had been at our wedding. But he was a professional. He did not ask why. He did not offer sympathy. "I will need a retainer," he said, "and access to whatever initial data you have." "I am wiring $50,000 to your account right now," I said. "And I have video footage from inside my home. I am uploading it to a secure server for you, Marcus. I need everything. I want to know about bank accounts, shell companies, medical records, hotel receipts. If they bought a pack of gum, I want to see the receipt." "Understood," Marcus said. "When do you need the preliminary report?" "I have a dinner party on Friday," I said. staring at the frozen image of Sloan standing in my office. I need enough to bury them by then. Friday, Marcus repeated. That is tight. But for 50,000, I will make it happen. I will have a team on it within the hour. Thank you, Marcus. I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen one last time, at the image of the woman who wanted to paint my life sage green. Enjoy the yoga studio while you can. Sloan, I whispered to the screen. I closed the browser, erasing the history. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the streets of Chicago. The city was fully awake now, a grid of steel and concrete, unforgiving and efficient. I felt a kinship with it. I had 4 days. The investigation had begun. The clock was ticking, and for the first time since the anniversary party, I did not feel like a victim. I felt like the predator. I turned back to my desk and began to work, not on interior design, but on the architecture of their destruction. The surface of a pond can be deceptively still while rotting debris shifts in the mud below. My marriage was exactly that, a picturesque reflection hiding a murky depth of sludge. Now that I knew where to look, I was not just dipping a toe in, I was diving to the bottom with a flashlight and a knife. I spent Tuesday afternoon locked in my office, not with Marcus, but alone with my laptop and a secure VPN. While Marcus was tracking their physical movements, I needed to follow the money. I had a degree in finance before I ever picked up a drafting pencil, a skill set my father insisted on. Creativity builds the house, he used to say, but accounting keeps the roof from caving in. I logged into our joint accounts first. On the surface, everything appeared pristine. The monthly bills were paid, the savings account had a healthy balance, and the credit card statements showed the usual mix of groceries, utilities, and dining. It was too clean. It was the financial equivalent of a staged home, everything in its place, designed to distract the eye from structural flaws. But I knew where the real money lived. We had a diversified portfolio: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and a high-yield retirement trust we had established 3 years ago. It was managed by a boutique firm Elias had recommended, claiming his old college buddy worked there and would give us a family rate. I pulled up the quarterly statements for the retirement trust. At first glance, the balance seemed correct, but when I drilled down into the transaction history, the pattern emerged. It was subtle, like a hairline fracture in a load-bearing wall. Small withdrawals, $5,000 here, $8,000 there. They were labeled innocuously, administrative fee adjustment, reallocation of assets, external capital call, in a fund worth several million. These amounts were rounding errors, easy to miss if you were just skimming the bottom line, but when I exported the data into a spreadsheet and filtered by beneficiary, the picture changed. All these adjustments were flowing to a single entity, SV Ventures. I frowned. SV Ventures? The name was lazy, insultingly lazy. I ran a search on the company. Nothing, no website, no LinkedIn profile, no press releases. It was a ghost. My phone buzzed. It was an encrypted email from Marcus. The subject line was simply Phase 1 Financials. I opened the attachment. Marcus's team worked fast. They had run a deep dive on SV Ventures using corporate registration databases that most civilians did not even know existed. Entity name, V Ventures LLC, Incorporation Jurisdiction Delaware, Registered Agent, a generic legal service in Wilmington, Managing Member Sloan Vane. There it was, in black and white. My husband was siphoning our retirement savings directly into a shell company owned by his mistress, but the scale of it was what made my blood run cold. I cross-referenced the withdrawals with the dates on the spreadsheet. It was not just 5 or 8,000. Those were the test runs. Once they realized I was not watching, the amounts had escalated. 50,000, 100,000. Then I saw the big one. 6 months ago. A transfer of $750,000. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. We did not have $750,000 in liquid cash sitting in that specific trust. Where had that capital come from? I frantically clicked through the bank records, tracing the source of that deposit. It had come from a secured loan, a loan against equity. I navigated to the Assets tab of our portfolio. My eyes scanned the list until they landed on the property in Aspen, my family's vacation home, the lodge my father had built, the place where I had learned to ski, the only piece of real estate I owned that held genuine sentimental value. I had brought it into the marriage as a premarital asset, but we had refinanced it 2 years ago to do renovations or so, I thought. The bank records showed a second mortgage taken out on the Aspen Lodge 6 months ago. The document was there, digitized and signed. Borrower, Amara Kingswell and Elias Thorne. I zoomed in on the signature line. Amara Kingswell. It was a good forgery. The loop of the A was slightly too wide. The slant of the K a little too aggressive, but to a loan officer who had never met me, it looked perfect. Elias had forged my signature. He had mortgaged my childhood home to fund his mistress's lifestyle. I pulled out my calculator and started adding up the total. The retirement fund drains, the Aspen loan, the credit card charges I had previously ignored, $1.5 million. In 18 months, my husband had stolen $1.5 million from me. I felt a wave of dizziness, but I forced it down. This was not the time to faint. This was the time to document. I went back to Marcus's report. He had managed to access the email server of Savi Ventures. It turns out, Sloan was not just lazy with naming her company. She was cheap with her IT security. She was using a basic hosting package with a password that was likely password 123. I opened the folder of emails Marcus had scraped. It was a treasure trove of betrayal. There were hundreds of emails between Elias and Sloan. I started reading, my eyes scanning rapidly. From Elias to Sloan. Subject, the Aspen transfer date, October 12, 2025. Baby. The bank just cleared the wire. $750,000 is hitting the S account tomorrow. That should cover the down payment on the condo in Miami and leave plenty for the consulting fees to get the rest of the cash out. Amara didn't even blink when I told her the bank needed a signature for some tax compliance forms. She signed the loan docs without reading them. God, she's so trusting it's pathetic. It's like stealing candy from a baby. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Stealing candy from a baby. I clicked on the next one, from Sloan to Elias. Subject re-timeline. Date November 3rd, 2025. I love the Miami place, but are we sure 1.5 is enough? Once the divorce hits, she's going to lawyer up. We need a war chest. You said the promotion is coming in January. Can we hold off until then, if you get the VP spot? Your severance package alone will be another $500,000 when you quit. We need to milk the naive ATM dry before we cut the cord. Naive ATM. That was what I was to them. Not a wife, not a friend, a machine that dispensed cash while they laughed at my stupidity. I read on. The plan was laid out in terrifying detail. Step 1. Use Savi Ventures to invest in fake startups. Elias, in his role at OmniStream, would approve these investments or partnerships, effectively laundering the money. Step 2. Use the stolen funds to buy real estate in Sloan's name, hidden under various LLCs. Step 3. Wait for Elias to get his promotion to Vice President of Marketing. This would trigger a massive stock option grant. Step 4. File for divorce in a no-fault state, claiming irreconcilable differences. Elias would argue that the Sanovi's Ventures investments were legitimate business losses that I had agreed to, citing the forged signatures, thereby devaluing our marital assets, so I would get nothing, while they kept the hidden real estate. Step 5. Leave me with the debt on the Aspen house and a depleted retirement fund. While they retired to Miami with millions, it was not just an affair, it was a long con, a sophisticated, cold-blooded financial execution. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was the icy clarity of a sniper adjusting their scope. They had underestimated one critical variable. I read everything. I always read everything. The only reason I hadn't caught them sooner was because I had trusted the source. But now that the trust was gone, their sloppy paper trail was glaringly obvious. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Catherine. Catherine was a shark in a silk suit, the kind of attorney other lawyers feared. "Catherine," I said when she answered, "I need you to clear your schedule for Friday morning. I have a case for you." "Amara." Catherine's voice was sharp. She heard the tone. "What kind of case?" "Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and divorce." I listed them off like grocery items. "I am sending you a secure file. It contains bank records, forged loan documents, and emails detailing a conspiracy to defraud. I need you to prepare a restraining order on all assets, a forensic accounting affidavit, and a criminal complaint for the district attorney." "Who is the defendant?" Catherine asked, though I think she already knew. "Elias Thorne," I said, "and Sloan Vane." "I will have the paralegals start drafting immediately," Catherine said, her voice shifting into battle mode. "Do you want to file now?" "No," I said. "Not yet. I need one more thing. I need to make sure the trap is completely shut." I hung up and turned back to the screen. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it The Apology. I began to drag files into it: the Aspen Mortgage, PDFS, V, Ventures Incorporation, PDF email _ naive ATM, PDF email _ stealing candy, PDF transaction _ history _ retirement trust, CSV. Each file was a nail in their coffin. I was not just going to divorce Elias. I was going to obliterate him. I was going to ensure that by the time I was done, he would not be able to get a credit card, let alone a job in this city. I printed everything, not just one copy, 3 copies, one for me, one for Catherine, and one for the special binder I was preparing for Friday night. Then, I did something specific. I went to the Secretary of State's website and flagged the notary who had stamped the forged Aspen documents. I recognized the name. It was a friend of Elias's from his gym. I added his name to the list: collateral damage. Anyone who helped them was going down. I looked at the total sum again: $1.5 million. It was a lot of money. But it wasn't the number that angered me most. It was the disrespect. It was the fact that they thought they were smarter than me. They thought because I was kind, I was blind. They thought because I loved, I was soft. They were about to learn that the softest silk is spun by a creature that eats its prey alive. I closed my laptop. It was 7 p.m. Elias would be home soon, expecting his submissive wife to be planning the perfect apology dinner. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I walked to the mirror in my office and checked my reflection. My face was pale, but my eyes were bright, burning with a terrifying intelligence. "You want an investment, Elias?" I whispered to my reflection. "I am about to give you a return you never calculated." I left the office, the hard drive containing their destruction tucked safely in my purse. The numbers had spoken, and they had sentenced my husband to a life of ruin. Now, I just needed the final piece of the puzzle, the one Marcus had hinted at in his last text message, something about a medical clinic. I walked out into the Chicago night, the wind biting at my face, feeling more alive than I had in years. The hunt was on. Wednesday morning broke with a deceptive calmness. The sky over Chicago was a bruised purple, clearing slowly into a pale, indifferent blue. Inside the penthouse, the air was still thick with the silent tension of the previous days. But Elias was whistling. He was in the shower, the sound of the water masking the tune. Preparing for another day of playing the role of the misunderstood husband, he thought he had weathered the storm. He thought my capitulation was genuine. I waited until the water pressure stabilized, signaling he was fully occupied, and then I picked up his car keys from the granite island in the kitchen. I told myself I was looking for financial receipts, perhaps a slip from a dinner or a hotel that Marcus had missed. The truth was, I was hunting for ghosts. I needed to be close to his secrets. I took the service elevator down to the private garage. His Audi Q8 sat there, gleaming and arrogant under the fluorescent lights. I unlocked it, the chirping sound echoing against the concrete walls like a warning. The interior smelled of leather and that cloying, floral scent I now recognized. Her perfume, it was faint, lingering on the passenger seat headrest. a spectral presence mocking me. I opened the glove box. Nothing but the manual and registration. I checked the center console, mints, charging cables, a spare pair of sunglasses. Then I looked at the passenger side door. There was a small, sleek trash bin tucked into the pocket, the kind designed to keep a luxury car looking pristine. I pulled it out. Inside were 2 empty coffee cups and a crumpled ball of paper. I smoothed out the paper on the leather seat. It was a receipt. Thermal paper slightly faded, but still legible. Lakeside Fertility Reproductive Medicine. My breath hitched. I stared at the logo, a stylized lotus flower that promised hope and new beginnings. I knew this clinic. It was the most exclusive, most expensive fertility center in the Midwest. I looked at the line items. Patient Sloan vein, service IV, F cycle 3, oocyte retrieval fertilization, service comprehensive prenatal care package, trimester 2, service cryo storage maintenance, total charge $24,500. The date was from yesterday. I sat there, the paper trembling in my hands, as the numbers rearranged themselves into a horrifying reality. $24,000. Paid by a credit card ending in 4098. My husband's hidden business card. Sloan was pregnant. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow to the stomach. I leaned back against the driver's seat, gasping for air. Pregnant. For a moment, the betrayal was purely emotional. It was the ultimate cliché. The husband gets the mistress pregnant, but then, the cold, razor-sharp logic that had served me so well in business kicked in, and the picture shifted from tragic to grotesque. I closed my eyes, and the memory of my 25th birthday washed over me, the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the steering wheel crushing my pelvis. I remembered waking up in the hospital, my father holding my hand, his face gray with grief, telling me that the surgeons had saved my life, but the damage to my uterus was catastrophic. I would never carry a child. I remembered telling Elias. We had been dating for 6 months. I tried to push him away, telling him I was broken, that I could not give him a family. He had held my face in his hands, looked me in the eyes, and swore that I was enough. We do not need children to be a family. Amara, he had said, it is you and me. That is all I want. He had lied, but there was a piece of the puzzle that did not fit. Sloan was married to Julian. If Sloan was pregnant, the natural assumption would be that it was Julian's child. But I knew better. I knew secrets that are shared after 3 bottles of wine at a dinner party. 2 years ago, Sloan had been drunk, draped over my sofa, complaining about her sex life. She had loudly lamented that Julian was shooting blanks. She had mocked him, calling him a mule, laughing about his azoospermia, a condition where a man produces 0 sperm. It was genetic. It was absolute. Julian could not father a child. So the baby was Elias's. My husband was creating a new family with my money, replacing the broken wife with the fertile mistress. It was a biological coup. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Marcus. I need you to look at the file I just uploaded, Marcus said. His voice was different this time. Gone was the professional detachment. He sounded disturbed. Folder labeled medical. I found a receipt, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the quiet garage. Sloan is pregnant. Is that it? That is part of it, Marcus said grimly. She is 5 months along. But Amara, that is not the worst part. You need to look at the documents from the clinic's legal department. I managed to get them through a contact. What could be worse than a secret baby? Marcus? Just read it, he said. And Amara, do not throw up. I disconnected the call and opened the secure app on my phone. I found the file. It was a scanned letter from the legal counsel of Lakeside Fertility, addressed to Mr. Elias Thorne. Re-request for access to genetic material. Kingswell Storage Lot, 402. Dear Mr. Thorne, we are writing to formally deny your request to transfer genetic material. Patient ID AK-1992 for use in gestational surrogacy with Miss Sloan Vane. As previously stated, The consent forms for the oocytes frozen in 2012 explicitly require the signature of the donor, Ms. Amara Kingswell, in the presence of a notary for any usage or thawing procedures. Furthermore, the DNA sample you provided, hair follicle/saliva swab, to establish spousal authority is insufficient to override the donor's original directives. Any further attempts to access this storage unit without the donor's direct presence will result in a report to the authorities. I read the letter twice, then a third time. The world tilted on its axis. When I was 20, 4 years before the accident, my father had insisted I freeze my eggs. He was a man who planned for every contingency. Insurance, he had called it. I had done it to please him. Storing them at a different facility. A long-term cryobank. I had almost forgotten they existed. I had certainly never told Elias the account number or the storage lot details, but he had found them. Elias had not just impregnated Sloan, he had tried to steal my eggs. He had tried to create a child that was biologically mine, but carried by Sloan. The question screamed in my mind. Why would he want my child if he had Sloan? Why go through the impossible hurdle of stealing genetic material? And then, the final tumblers of the lock clicked into place. The realization was so cold it burned. The Kingswell Family Trust. My father's will was ironclad. The bulk of the family fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars in assets, real estate, and bonds was tied up in a generational trust. I received a generous income, but the principal was locked. It could only be unlocked by a direct heir of the body, a biological child, if I died without a biological heir. The money went to charity. If I had a child, the trust unlocked. Elias did not want a baby. He wanted the key. He had calculated it perfectly. If he could manage to fertilize one of my eggs with his sperm and have Sloan carry it to term, they could claim it was our child via a surrogate, a procedure done quietly to surprise me. Or more likely, he planned to divorce me, gain custody of the child by proving I was unfit or unstable, and then control the trust as the child's legal guardian. He had stolen my hair. He had taken my toothbrush. He had submitted them to the clinic, trying to fake a DNA authorization to steal the last remnants of my fertility. He wanted to harvest me. He looked at me and saw a bank vault. He looked at Sloan and saw an incubator. A wave of nausea rolled over me, violent and unstoppable. I opened the car door and leaned out, dry heaving onto the concrete floor of the garage. My body was rejecting the knowledge, trying to purge the sickness of his betrayal. This was not adultery. This was bioterrorism. This was a violation so profound, so intimate, that it made the physical act of cheating look like a minor indiscretion. He had tried to steal my unborn children to fund his life with another woman. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I sat up. The tears that had been threatening to fall earlier were gone. They had evaporated in the heat of a rage so pure, so white-hot, that I felt invincible. I looked at the receipt again. Sloan was 5 months pregnant, but the clinic letter was dated 2 months ago. His plan to steal my eggs had failed because of the clinic's security protocols. So, the baby Sloan was carrying now, it was just his and hers. It was a biological dead end for his master plan. That explained the desperation I had seen in his emails about the war chest. Plan A. The billion-dollar baby had failed, so now they were scrambling for Plan B, stealing the $1.5 million and running. He was not just a villain, he was a failed villain. He was a desperate, grasping parasite who had tried to play God with my DNA and lost. I took a photo of the receipt. Then I took a photo of the legal letter on my phone screen. Ensuring I had a backup, I put the receipt back in the trash, crumpling it exactly as I had found it. I stepped out of the car and locked it. The chirp sounded different this time. It sounded like a countdown. I took the elevator back up to the penthouse. When I walked into the kitchen, Elias was there, fully dressed in his suit, pouring coffee. He looked up and smiled, that handsome, lying smile that had fooled me for half a decade. "Hey, babe," he said. "I didn't hear you leave. Where were you?" "Just checking the mail downstairs," I said. My voice was steady. It was terrifyingly steady. I wanted to make sure everything is perfect for the dinner on Friday. You are stressing too much, Elias said. Walking over to kiss my cheek, I stood perfectly still, letting his lips touch my skin. It felt like being kissed by a corpse. It is going to be great. Sloan is really looking forward to it. She wants to bury the hatchet. Oh, I am sure she does, I said, looking at his neck, imagining the noose of evidence tightening around it. I am sure she has a lot of expectations for the future. She does, Elias said, oblivious. She is going through a lot right now. Julian is, well, he is useless. She needs friends like us. We will be more than friends, I promised him. By Friday night, we will be unforgettable. That is the spirit, he said. He checked his watch. I have to run. Big meeting with the board. Love you. Love you, I said. The lie tasted like ash, but I swallowed it. I watched him leave. As the door clicked shut, I went to the sink and scrubbed my cheek where he had kissed me. I scrubbed until the skin was raw and red. Then I walked into the living room and looked at the space where the party would happen. I had the financial records. I had the emails. And now, I had the medical smoking gun. But I needed one more player. I needed the man who was being played just as hard as I was. I needed the useless husband. I picked up my phone and searched for Julian Vane. I knew where his architecture studio was. It was a small, struggling firm in the West Loop. Hello, Julian, I whispered to his photo on the website. I think it is time we had a talk about your wife's miracle baby. I grabbed my coat. The nausea was gone. In its place was a hunger. I was going to feed them their own lies, course by course, until they choked. The architecture of a lie is fragile. It relies on the isolation of its victims. As long as the deceived parties remain separate, trapped in their own silos of doubt and gaslighting, the liar remains safe. Elias and Sloan had built their castle on the assumption that Julian and I would never compare notes. They banked on my pride and Julian's passivity. They believed that I would be too ashamed to reach out to the husband of my husband's mistress, and that Julian would be too blindly loyal to listen if I did. It was a structural flaw I intended to exploit. I called Julian Vane at 10 in the morning. I used my personal cell, not the office line. When he answered, his voice was tight, expecting an attack. He assumed I was calling to scream about the wine, the dress, the ruined anniversary. He sounded tired, the exhaustion of a man constantly apologizing for a wife who weaponized her own incompetence. Julian, I said, keeping my voice low and devoid of anger, I need to see you, not about the dress, not about the party, about something else, something that cannot be discussed over the phone. He hesitated. Amara, look, Sloan is really upset. She feels terrible about Friday. I don't think me meeting you behind her back is going to help the situation. She is in a fragile place right now. She is not fragile. Julian, I said, cutting through his defense mechanism. And she is not upset. I am going to be at the Black Oak Cafe in Skokie in 1 hour. It is 40 minutes from your office. Please, if you care about your marriage, and if you care about the truth, meet me there. I hung up before he could say no. Curiosity is a powerful motivator, but fear is stronger. He would come because he was terrified of what I might know. The Black Oak was a dark, wood-paneled coffee shop far removed from the glitzy downtown loop where our social circle preened. I sat in a booth in the back, nursing a black coffee. I watched the door. At 11:15, Julian walked in. He looked older than his 38 years. He was a handsome man in a soft, academic way. Tweed jacket, wire-rimmed glasses, hair slightly unkempt, but his shoulders were slumped, and there were dark circles carved deep under his eyes. He looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy load for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. He spotted me and walked over. Sliding into the booth opposite me, he didn't order anything. He just clasped his hands on the table, looking at his knuckles. If this is about the apology dinner, Julian started, his voice weary. Sloan told me Elias demanded it. You don't have to do it. Amara, I told her it was ridiculous. I can talk to Elias. It is not about the dinner, I interrupted gently. Julian, look at me. He looked up. His eyes were kind, brown and swimming with confusion. How is Sloan? I asked. She is struggling. Julian sighed, rubbing his face. She has been depressed for months. Mood swings, sleeping all day, eating weird things. She says she feels empty. She says our marriage has lost its spark because I work too much. I have been trying. Amara, I really have. I have been taking on extra projects to pay for therapy, for vacations, but nothing seems to make her happy. I felt a pang of pity. It was a sharp, physical ache. I saw myself in him, the tireless effort, the self-blame, the desperate attempt to fill a bucket that had a hole in the bottom. She is not depressed, Julian, I said softly. You don't know her like I do. He defended, though the conviction wasn't there. She has anxiety. She is pregnant, I said. The words hung in the air between us, suspended in the scent of roasted coffee beans and dust. Julian froze. He stared at me, his mouth opening slightly, but no sound came out. He blinked, once, twice, as if trying to process a language he didn't speak. Then, a nervous, jagged laugh escaped him. What? No, that is impossible. Amara, you are mistaken. We stopped trying years ago. We can't. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I slid the photograph of the receipt across the table. I found this in my husband's car this morning, I said. From Lakeside Fertility. She is in her second trimester, 5 months along. Julian looked at the receipt. He read the line items. IVF cycle, prenatal care. He went pale, a sickly grayish pallor that made him look like he might faint. He touched the paper with a trembling finger. 5 months, he whispered. But I have azoospermia. I am sterile. The doctors told us 5 years ago. There is 0 count. We can't have children naturally, and we never did IVF. We couldn't afford it. Elias paid for it, I said. The brutality of the truth was necessary. I couldn't sugarcoat the bullet. I had to fire it. That credit card number on the receipt, that is Elias's business account. And the sperm donor. Julian, it is not a donor. Julian looked up at me. The realization hit him in waves. First confusion, then shock, and finally, a devastation so profound it was hard to watch. His eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of sheer, agonizing betrayal. Elias, he choked out. My friend, they have been having an affair for at least 2 years, I said. The late nights, the mood swings, the depression. It was them. She wasn't sleeping all day because she was sad. Julian, she was dealing with morning sickness. And she wasn't distant because you were working too much. She was distant because she was building a new life with my husband. Julian made a low, guttural whimper and buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook violently. He didn't cry loudly. He imploded. He was a man watching his entire reality dissolve into dust. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his arm. I didn't say anything. I just held on, acting as an anchor while the storm raged through him. I knew this pain. I had felt it 48 hours ago. It was the death of the self. The Julian who walked into this cafe was gone. The man sitting here now was a survivor in the wreckage. After a long time, he lifted his head. His eyes were red, but there was a new hardness in them, a flicker of something dangerous. Why, he asked. His voice was cracked. Why did she stay if she loves him, if she is carrying his child? Why stay with me? Why make me pay for her therapy? Why make me feel like I was the failure? Because they needed money, I said. And they needed cover. Elias is waiting for a promotion. He needed to keep his image clean until he secured his payout. And Sloan likes having a safety net. Julian laughed again, bitter and sharp. Money, God, the money. He looked out the window, his jaw tightening. You know, my firm. We used to be doing okay. Small, but prestigious. But the last 18 months, we have been bleeding. I kept losing bids. I would design something a library, a boutique hotel, and then, right before the presentation, a competitor would swoop in with a design that looked suspiciously like mine, but undercut by 10%. He looked back at me, his eyes wide with a horrific epiphany. I thought I was going crazy, he whispered. I thought I was being hacked. I hired IT guys. I changed servers, but the leak didn't stop. I lost 3 major contracts last year. I had to lay off my junior architect. I took out a second mortgage on our house just to keep the lights on. He grabbed the receipt from the table and crushed it in his fist. It was her, he hissed. She has access to my home computer. She knows my passwords. She would bring me coffee while I worked late. Look at the screens. Amara. She was stealing my designs. She was selling them. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. This was worse than I thought. Sloan wasn't just a mistress. She was a parasite in the truest biological sense. She was feeding on Julian's talent, draining him dry to fund her future with Elias. She sold your work, I deduced, connecting the dots. And she funneled the cash into a shell company called SV Ventures. That is where Elias has been sending our retirement money to. They have been bleeding us both. Julian, they have been cannibalizing our lives to build a nest egg for themselves. Julian slammed his fist on the table. The cups rattled. People turned to look, but he didn't care. I worked so hard, he said, his voice trembling with rage. I worked so hard to make her happy. I thought I wasn't enough. I thought I was a failure as a husband because I couldn't give her a baby, and I couldn't give her the luxury she wanted. And the whole time, she was the one holding the knife. Yes, I said firmly. She was. I leaned in closer. But now, we are holding the knife, Julian, and we are going to cut back. Julian looked at me. The despair was receding, replaced by a cold, focused anger. It mirrored my own. We were 2 people who had been kind, who had been trusting, and who had been punished for it. What do you want to do? He asked. I have a plan, I said. I have the financial records. I have the medical proof. But I need more on the business theft. If we can prove she stole your intellectual property, we can send her to prison. Not just divorce court. Can you prove she accessed the files? Julian nodded slowly. If she used my home server, there are logs. I never checked the local user history because I never suspected my wife. But if I look, I can find the transfer timestamps. Good, I said. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to go home. You are going to act like everything is normal. You are going to be the tired, apologetic husband she expects you to be. You are going to tell her you are looking forward to the dinner on Friday. Friday, Julian repeated. The apology dinner. Exactly, I said. We are going to give them the show they want. We are going to let them think they have won, and while she is busy picking out her outfit for Friday. I need you to get into her laptop. I need you to find the communications where she sold your designs. Can you do that? Her laptop? Julian murmured. She changed the password a few months ago. Said she needed privacy for her journaling. He paused, a dark smile touching his lips. But she doesn't know that I installed a keylogger on the network last year when I thought I was being hacked by corporate spies. I never checked her device because, well, why would I? But the software is still running in the background. Perfect, I said. A shiver of anticipation went through me. Get everything, Julian, every email, every file transfer, and bring it to the dinner on a flash drive. And then what? He asked. And then, I said. We served the main course. We sat there for another moment, 2 soldiers in a war we hadn't asked for but were determined to win. I looked at Julian and saw a transformation. The soft, beaten-down man was gone. In his place was someone capable of doing what needed to be done. He reached out his hand across the table. I took it. His grip was firm. I am sorry, Amara, he said, for what they did to you. And I am sorry for what they did to you, I replied. But apologies are for the past. We are looking at the future now. Friday, he said, releasing my hand. I will be there, and I will have the drive. Wear a suit, I told him as I stood up. Dress like you are going to a funeral, because in a way, you are, he nodded. The funeral of the man who let them walk all over him. I left him there in the booth, staring at the table but seeing, I suspected, a new blueprint for his life. I walked out into the sunlight of the parking lot. I had my team, I had my evidence, and now I had my inside man. The stage was set. The players were in position. All that was left was to light the fuse and watch the fireworks. Thursday arrived with the deceptive tranquility of a calm sea before a tsunami. The penthouse was filled with the scent of lilies, Sloan's favorite flower. Elias had suggested I buy them. A peace offering, he had called it. Standing in the living room and critiquing the placement of the vase, I had smiled, a tight, obedient smile, and arranged the white blooms exactly where he wanted them. Every stem I trimmed felt like sharpening a knife. I spent the morning curating the menu. I did not cook. I hired Le Monde, the most exclusive French bistro in the city. To cater the affair, I ordered the 7-course tasting menu. Oysters Rockefeller, foie gras torchon, lobster thermidor. It was a menu designed to impress, to scream wealth and contrition. I selected the wine myself, a 2015 Chateau Margaux for the red, and a vintage Dom Pérignon for the toast. Make sure the champagne is chilled to exactly 45 degrees, Elias instructed me as he adjusted his cufflinks in the mirror. Sloan hates it when it is lukewarm. Of course, I said, smoothing the lapel of his jacket. Everything will be perfect. He looked at me in the mirror, satisfied with his reflection, and with the submissive version of his wife standing behind him. You are doing the right thing. Amara, I know it is hard for your ego, but this is what marriage is about, compromise. I understand that now, I said softly. I have learned my lesson. He kissed my forehead, a gesture of benevolent ownership. Good girl. As soon as he left for work, claiming he had a final prep meeting for a project, which I knew was actually a lunch date with Sloan, I dropped the facade. The good girl vanished. The CEO emerged. I drove straight to the offices of Sterling Associates on Wacker Drive. Catherine, my lawyer, was waiting in the conference room. The mahogany table was covered in neat stacks of paper. This is comprehensive, Catherine said, tapping the binder I had sent her. We have enough here to not only secure a divorce, but to trigger a federal investigation. The forgery on the Aspen mortgage alone carries a sentence of up to 10 years. I want it all, I said, sitting down and pulling a pen from my purse. I want the divorce filed the minute the dinner starts. I want the restraining order on the assets ready to be served. And the fraud complaint. Drafted and ready for the district attorney, Catherine confirmed. We also have the forensic accounting affidavit from your investigator. It tracks every dollar. The $1.5 million is accounted for, traced directly to S. Ventures. I signed the documents one by one. My signature was steady, flowing across the page with lethal precision. Amara Kingswell, Amara Kingswell, Amara Kingswell, with each stroke of the pen. I was reclaiming my life. One more thing, Catherine said, sliding a document across the table. The asset transfer. We successfully moved the remaining liquid cash from your personal accounts and the joint savings you still control into the Asset Protection Trust in the Cayman Islands. It is untouchable. If Elias tries to access the accounts tomorrow, he will find them empty. Good, I said. Leave him nothing but the debt. I left the law firm and headed to my next appointment. This one was riskier, but necessary. I took the elevator up to the 40th floor of the Omni Stream building. I did not go to the marketing department where Elias worked. I went to the executive suite. The receptionist looked at me with polite confusion. Mrs. Thorne Elias is on the 18th floor. I am not here to see my husband, I said, my voice cool and authoritative. I am here to see the board of directors. I have an appointment with Mr. Sterling, the chairman. The receptionist blinked, checking her screen. Oh, yes, I see it here. Please, go right in. Elias knew I came from money, but he never truly understood the source of that money. He knew my father was a developer. He did not know that Kingswell Holdings was one of the angel investors that had funded OmniStream's initial seed round 15 years ago. My family trust held an 8% stake in the company. It was a silent partnership, managed by a proxy to keep my business separate from Elias's career. I had never interfered. I had never pulled strings to get him hired or promoted. He had gotten the job on his own merit, or so I thought. But today, the silence ended. Mr. Sterling, a silver-haired lion of industry, greeted me warmly. Amara, it has been years. Your father is missed every day. Thank you. Arthur, I said, shaking his hand. I wish this were a social call. I sat down and opened my briefcase. I pulled out a file marked OmniStream Internal Audit. I have reason to believe that a senior employee is embezzling company funds, I said. Arthur's smile vanished. That is a serious accusation. Who? Elias Thorne, I said. Arthur stiffened. Your husband? Yes, I said. And here's the proof. I laid out the credit card statements Marcus had flagged. The dinners, the hotels, the flights to conferences that did not exist, all charged to the OmniStream corporate account. He has been expensing personal vacations with his mistress as business development trips, I explained. He has also been steering company investment funds into a shell company called SV Ventures, claiming they are strategic startups. The total theft from OmniStream is approximately $200,000 over the last year. Arthur read the documents in silence. His face turned a shade of red that matched the mahogany table. He is using my company as his personal piggy bank. Arthur growled. He is, I agreed. I am handling the domestic side of this, Arthur, but I thought the board should know before the police arrive. I do not want the company's reputation dragged through the mud. You have done us a great service, Amara, Arthur said, his voice cold. Consider him terminated. Security will be waiting for him tomorrow morning. Actually, I said, standing up, wait until Monday. Let him have his weekend. I have plans for him. Arthur looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. Very well, Monday it is. I walked out of the building feeling lighter than air. I had just fired my husband, and he had no idea. Friday evening came. The sky was a bruised purple over Lake Michigan. I stood in my dressing room, looking at the rows of designer clothes. Elias expected me to wear something soft, something feminine and apologetic, perhaps a pastel dress, or the floral silk blouse he liked. I reached past them and pulled out a dress I had bought in Milan and never worn. It was black. Not a morning black, but a predator black. It was structured, with sharp shoulders and a plunging neckline that was more dangerous than inviting. It was a dress that said, I am the CEO of this room. I put it on. It fit like a second skin. I applied my makeup with surgical precision winged eyeliner sharp enough to cut, and a deep, blood-red lipstick. I swept my hair back into a sleek, severe bun. When I walked downstairs, the catering staff was already setting up. The aroma of truffle and butter filled the air. The table was set with my grandmother's silver and the finest crystal. Elias was in the living room, pouring himself a scotch. He turned when he heard my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. He stopped mid-sip. His eyes widened. Wow, he said. You look intense. I wanted to look my best for Sloan, I said smoothly. This is a special occasion, isn't it? It is, Elias agreed, though he looked slightly unsettled. But maybe it is a bit much. You look like you are going to a gala, not a quiet dinner with friends. Nonsense, I said, adjusting a fork on the table. Sloan loves fashion. She will appreciate the effort. I walked over to the sideboard where I had set up the projector. It was a sleek, portable model, pointed at the large blank wall of the dining room. What is that for? Elias asked, pointing his glass. Oh, I thought it would be nice to have a visual component to my apology. I lied effortlessly. I put together a slideshow, photos of us, of Sloan and Julian, memories of the last few years, to remind us of the friendship we are trying to save. Elias beamed. He actually beamed. That is amazing. That is such a thoughtful touch. Sloan is going to cry. She loves that sentimental stuff. I am counting on it, I murmured. The doorbell rang. Elias checked his watch. Right on time, 7:00 p.m. He walked to the door, straightening his tie. I stood by the head of the table, my hand resting on the back of my chair. My heart was beating slow and hard. A war drum in my chest. I touched the small remote control in my pocket. The flash drive Julian had given me earlier that day slipped into my hand during a quick exchange in the lobby of my building was plugged into the projector. It contained the final nails in the coffin, the logs of stolen designs. The door opened. Hey, come on in. Elias's voice was boisterous. Fake. Hi, Elias. Sloane's voice drifted in. It was high, sweet, and grating. We brought wine. You didn't have to do that, Elias said. Amara has everything set up. They walked into the dining room. Sloan was wearing a loose floral maxi dress, the kind designed to hide a baby bump while looking boho chic. She looked radiant, glowing with the hormones of pregnancy and the satisfaction of victory. She held Elias's arm for a second too long before turning to me. Amara, she said, her smile wide and pitifully condescending. You look stunning. A bit dressy for a Friday, but stunning. Hello, Sloan, I said. I did not move to hug her. Thank you for coming. Behind her stood Julian. He was wearing a dark gray suit, just as I had asked. He looked pale, but his eyes were clear. He locked eyes with me for a fraction of a second, a silent nod of solidarity before turning to Elias. Thanks for having us. Elias, Julian said, his voice steady. Of course, man. Elias slapped him on the back. Let's get drinks. Champagne is chilling. Please, I said, gesturing to the table. Sit down. We have a lot to get through tonight. Elias poured the champagne. The bubbles rose in the flutes. Golden and effervescent, he raised his glass. To friendship, Elias toasted, looking at Sloan with masked adoration. To forgiveness, and to moving forward. To moving forward, Sloan echoed, clinking her glass against his. To the truth, I said, raising my glass, but not drinking. To the truth, Julian added quietly. We sat. The first course was served. Oysters. So, Sloan said, picking up her fork. Elias tells me you have planned something special. Amara, I have to say, I was hurt by the other night, but I am willing to put it behind us if you are. I am very willing to put the past behind us, I said, watching her eat. In fact, I insist on it. That is so big of you, Sloan smiled. I know you can be rigid. It is good to see you loosening up. I have prepared a little presentation, I said, standing up. Before we get to the main course, I think we should clear the air completely. Oh, a slideshow, Sloan clapped her hands. I love photos. Elias told me, I said. He said you love sentimental things. I picked up the remote. Lights, please. Elias, I instructed. Elias, playing the helpful husband, dimmed the chandelier. The room plunged into semi-darkness, the only light coming from the street lamps outside and the glow of the projector warming up. Ready? I asked. Ready, Elias said, leaning back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. He expected pictures of barbecues and graduation parties. He expected a montage of our happy lives. I pressed the button. The fan of the projector whirred to life. A rectangle of bright light hit the wall, and the show began. The air in the dining room was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the savory richness of lobster. But underneath it all, I could smell the metallic tang of fear waiting to be unleashed. The clock on the wall ticked past 7:15. The first course had been cleared. and we were now waiting for the main entree. The silence between the clinking of silverware was filled with a performance so grotesque it made my stomach turn. Elias was in his element. He sat at the head of the table, radiating the benevolence of a king who had successfully quelled a rebellion. He poured more wine into Sloane's glass, his hand lingering near hers on the stemware. "You have to try the 15 Margot," he said to her, his voice dropping an octave into that intimate register he used when he thought I wasn't listening. "It has notes of blackberry and truffle, very complex, just like you." Sloane giggled, a sound that grated against my nerves like glass shards. She took a sip, her eyes fluttering closed in exaggerated pleasure. Divine. You always have the best taste. Elias." She turned her gaze to me, her expression shifting instantly from flirtatious to patronizing. "Amara, you really outdid yourself with the catering. It is almost too much. I hope you didn't go to all this trouble just because you felt guilty." "Guilt is a powerful motivator," I said, cutting a piece of my lobster with surgical precision. "It drives people to do extraordinary things." "Well, I appreciate the effort," Sloane said, leaning back in her chair and resting a hand on her stomach. The floral dress draped over the slight swell of her belly, a secret she thought was hers alone. "I know it must be hard for you, admitting you were wrong. Not everyone has the grace to apologize." Under the table, I saw movement. The tablecloth shifted. Elias's foot was extending, seeking hers. I watched as her shoe slipped off, her toes tracing the line of his calf. They were playing footsie in my dining room, while my husband's mistress lectured me on grace. Julian sat quietly on my left. He was picking at his food, his face a mask of polite disinterest, but every few seconds, his eyes would dart to me, burning with a silent question. "Now is it time now?" I gave him a subtle shake of my head. "Not yet. Let them get comfortable." "So, Julian," Elias boomed, trying to include the useless husband in the conversation. "How is business still drawing those little houses?" It was a dig, wrapped in a joke. Elias loved to belittle Julian's profession, contrasting it with his own high-powered corporate role. "Business is illuminating," Julian said, taking a long sip of his water. "I have been discovering some interesting flaws in my security protocols lately. It turns out I had a leak." Sloane froze for a microsecond, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth. She glanced at Julian sharply, but his face was impassive. She relaxed, dismissing it as tech talk. "Oh, boring," Sloane sighed. "Let's not talk shop. Tonight is about healing. Tonight is about friendship." Elias nodded vigorously. "Exactly. Speaking of which, Amara, babe, I think we have dragged out the small talk enough. Why don't we get to the main event? You had something you wanted to say to Sloane. Didn't you?" He looked at me, his eyes hard and expectant. This was the moment he had orchestrated, the moment of my humiliation. He wanted me to grovel. He wanted me to verbally submit to the woman he was sleeping with, to validate her status in our lives. "Yes," Sloane added, tilting her head. "I am listening, Amara. I am ready to forgive you." "Forgive me," I repeated slowly. "That is a beautiful concept. Sloane, forgiveness." I pushed my chair back and stood up. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh sound that cut through the ambient jazz music. I walked to the head of the table, standing next to Elias but facing them all. I picked up my water glass crystal, heavy, cold. "Elias is right," I said, my voice projecting clearly in the dim room. "I have been thinking a lot about my behavior at the anniversary party. I realized that I didn't fully understand the dynamic between you two. I was looking at things through the lens of a wife, not a friend, and that was my mistake." Elias nodded, looking satisfied. "See, I told you she would come around." I needed to understand my position, I continued, my eyes locking onto Sloane's. I needed to see the full picture, and once I did, I realized that a simple, "I am sorry," wouldn't suffice. Words are cheap, aren't they? Actions speak louder. "They certainly do," Sloane said, smugness radiating off her. "So, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the remote control. I thought the best way to honor this unique friendship was to celebrate its history, to show everyone exactly what this bond is built on. Oh, the slideshow. Sloan clapped her hands again. I love looking at old photos. Do you have the ones from the lake house last summer? I have photos from everywhere. Sloan, I said. Everywhere. I pointed the remote at the wall behind Julian and Sloan. Elias, if you would. I gestured to the dimmer switch. Way ahead of you. Babe. Elias dimmed the lights further, plunging us into a theatrical twilight. The projector beam cut through the darkness, a blinding rectangle of white light. Let's take a walk down memory lane, I whispered. I pressed the button. Click. The first slide appeared. It was not a photo of a barbecue. It was not a selfie of the four of us smiling on a boat. It was a high-resolution, grainy but unmistakable black and white image taken from a security camera. The timestamp in the corner read October 14th, 2025, 11:42 p.m. The location, the parking garage of the OmniStream building. The subject, a silver Audi Q8. My husband's car. The passenger door was open. Elias was leaning into the car, his jacket discarded on the ground. Sloan was inside, her legs wrapped around his waist, her head thrown back in ecstasy, her hands gripping his hair. They were kissing, no. They were devouring each other with a feral intensity that left nothing to the imagination. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, where all sound had been sucked out of the universe. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The image loomed over us, 10 feet tall, magnified to grotesque proportions. Every detail was visible: the sweat on Elias's shirt, the way Sloane's dress was hiked up her thighs. Then, the sound of silverware hitting china shattered the spell. Sloan dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against her plate, bouncing onto the table. Elias's face drained of color so fast it looked like the blood had been siphoned out of him. He stared at the wall, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. His eyes bulged. "What?" he croaked. "What? Is this—" Sloan made a strangled noise. She grabbed the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. She looked from the screen to me, her eyes wide with terror. "Amara!" Elias turned to me, his voice trembling, pitching up into a panic. "Amara, what the hell is this? Is this some kind of sick joke? Did you Photoshop this?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of the executioner raising the axe. "Oh, don't worry," I said, my voice calm and deadly. "I am just getting started. You wanted a tribute to your friendship, didn't you? Let's see the next slide." Click. Slide 2. A screenshot of a text message thread. The font was blown up so it was readable from across the room. Sender Sloan, my soulmate recipient. Elias, date November 2nd, 2025. Sloan. I can't wait until she signs the Aspen loan papers. She is so stupid. Elias. She actually thinks you are using the money for renovations. God, I hate her. I hate her face. I hate her success. When can we leave? When can we stop pretending? Elias. Patience, baby. January. Once the bonus hits and the SV account is full. I will serve her papers. We will take the money and run. She will be left with nothing but the debt and her empty uterus. The room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Her empty uterus. I read the words aloud, my voice echoing in the dining room. That is a nice touch. Elias. Very poetic. Sloan let out a sob. It was a high, terrified sound. "No," she whimpered. "No, that is not real. You faked that." "Did I asked. "Julian, does that look fake to you?" I turned to Julian. He was sitting perfectly still, staring at the screen. He stood up slowly. He looked at Sloan, not with anger, but with a disgust so profound it was almost pity. "It looks pretty real to me," Julian said, his voice flat. "Julian," Sloan shrieked, reaching for his arm. "Don't listen to her. She is crazy. She is trying to ruin us." Julian recoiled from her touch as if she were radioactive. "Don't touch me!" he snarled. The venom in his voice made her flinch back. Elias slammed his hands on the table, standing up so abruptly his chair tipped over backward with a crash. "Turn it off!" he shouted, his face twisting into a mask of rage and panic. "Amara, turn it off right now. You are violating my privacy. You are insane." He lunged toward the projector. "Sit down, Elias," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I said turn it off. He moved around the table, coming toward me with menacing intent. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. They were not waiters. They were private security guards I had hired from Marcus's firm. They were large, impassive, and very intimidating. They stepped between me and Elias, crossing their arms. Elias stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at the guards, then back at me. "Who the hell are they?" he hissed. "They are here to ensure you watch the whole presentation," I said coolly. "Sit down." Elias looked at the guards, sizing them up. He realized he couldn't win physically. Defeated, he backed away, gripping the back of an empty chair. He was breathing heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. "You are going to regret this," he spat. "You are destroying this marriage. This marriage was destroyed the moment you forged my signature on a mortgage application," I said. "Or maybe it was when you stole my eggs. It is hard to pinpoint the exact moment of death, isn't it?" "Stole your—" Elias froze. His eyes darted to Sloan. Sloan was weeping now, ugly, heaving sobs, her face buried in her hands. "Oh, we haven't gotten to the best part yet," I said, thumb hovering over the button. The medical history. Click, slide 3, the receipt from Lakeside Fertility, the letter from the clinic's legal department denying access to my genetic material, and a timeline graphic I had created, showing the dates of their hotel stays overlapping with Sloan's ovulation cycles. "Surprise," I said dryly. "It is a boy, isn't it? Or maybe a girl?" The receipt didn't specify the gender, just the cost. $24,000 of my money to impregnate your mistress. Sloan looked up, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. She looked like a gargoyle. "How?" she whispered. "How did you get that?" "I own the car you left the trash in." "Sloan," I said, "and I own the house you are sitting in. And technically, until about 3 hours ago, I owned the bank account you were draining. But not anymore." Elias stared at the screen. The reality of his exposure was setting in. He wasn't just caught cheating, he was caught stealing, forging, and conspiring. "Amara," he started, his voice shifting from anger to a desperate, wheedling tone. "Baby, listen, it is not what it looks like. The text messages. We were just venting. It was a fantasy. We never meant to hurt you. And the baby, it was an accident. We were going to tell you." "An accident," I laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "IVF is not an accident, Elias. It is a medical procedure. You don't trip and fall onto a petri dish." I turned to Julian. "Julian, your turn." Julian reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the table in front of Sloan. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Sloan whispered, staring at the envelope. "It is the logs from your laptop," Julian said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the heartbreak underneath it. "I know about the designs. Sloan, I know you sold my work. I know you sold the boutique hotel plans to Reynolds Group for 50 grand. I know you sent the money to SV Ventures." Sloan's mouth fell open. "Julian, no, I did it for us. We needed the money." "You did it for him," Julian shouted, pointing at Elias. "You stole from me to give to him. You bankrupted my firm to buy him a condo in Miami." Sloan shrank back, sobbing harder. "It is over." "Sloan," Julian said. "I spoke to the police this afternoon. Intellectual property theft is a felony, and since you used interstate wire transfers to move the money, it is federal." "Police!" Elias's head snapped up. You called the police. We both did, I said. Click, the final slide. It was not a document. It was a live feed from the security camera at the front gate of our building. Blue and red lights were flashing in the darkness. 2 squad cars were pulled up to the curb. Officers were getting out. They are here for you, Elias, I said softly. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery, identity theft, and Arthur Sterling sends his regards. By the way, he was very interested in your business expenses. Elias looked at the screen. He looked at the flashing lights. He looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a small, terrified man in a suit that suddenly looked too big for him. You can't do this, he whispered. I am your husband. No, I said, putting the remote down on the table. You are the defendant. The doorbell rang. It was a long, insistent ring. I think that is your ride, I said. Get out of my house. Elias stared at me for one last second. I saw the hate in his eyes, pure and unadulterated, but underneath the hate was fear. He knew, finally, that he had lost. He had underestimated the architect. He thought he could pull down the pillars of my life, and I would just stand there in the rubble. He forgot that I knew how to build a fortress. He turned and walked toward the door, his legs unsteady. Sloan scrambled up to follow him, clutching her purse, still crying. Julian, she wailed, looking back at her husband. Please help me. Julian didn't even look at her. He poured himself a glass of the 15 Margot, took a sip, and looked at me. Excellent wine, Amara, he said. Thank you. Julian, I replied. It has complex notes, just like revenge. The room was vibrating with the kind of silence that usually precedes a bomb detonation. Elias was gripping the back of his chair, his knuckles white, staring at the screen where his adulterous texts were still glowing in high definition. Sloan was sobbing into her hands, a sound that might have garnered sympathy if I did not know exactly how much malice was hidden behind those tears. You have seen the heart, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Now, let us look at the wallet. I pressed the button on the remote. Click. The screen flickered and changed. Gone were the grainy photos of the parking garage. In their place was a spreadsheet. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting, color-coded and devastatingly clear. Slide 2, I announced. A study in economics. The projection showed a side-by-side comparison. On the left were the withdrawals from the Kingswell Thorne Retirement Trust. On the right were the deposit logs for SV Ventures. The arrows connecting them were thick and red. $300 for a consulting fee here, I narrated, pointing the remote like a laser pointer. $5,000 for market research there. And look at this one, my personal favorite. $750,000 wired directly from a secured loan against my family home in Aspen. Elias made a noise in his throat, a strangled protest. That was a legitimate business loan. We were diversifying. Diversifying into what? Elias? I asked, turning to look at him. Because according to the incorporation documents I pulled from Delaware, SV Ventures has no employees, no product, and no office. Its only asset is a bank account controlled by one Sloan Vane. I looked at Sloan. She lowered her hands, her face blotchy and ruined. You spent it well, though, I continued. I traced the outflows, a condominium deposit in Miami, first-class tickets to Cabo, and of course, a rather significant amount spent at luxury boutiques on Oak Street. That Yves Saint Laurent bag you are hiding under the table, purchased on March 12th with funds stolen from my 401k. Sloan instinctively pulled her purse closer to her chest, as if physically shielding the stolen goods could hide the crime. It is not stealing, Sloan shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. Elias said it was his money. He said he earned it. He lied, I said simply. He earned a salary, I provided the capital, and you both conspired to drain it. That is $1.5 million. Sloan, in the state of Illinois, theft over $500,000 is a Class 1 felony, mandatory prison time, no probation. Sloane's eyes went wide. The reality of the numbers was finally hitting her. But surely, I said, pacing slowly around the table. Money is just paper. We can print more money, but family is blood. Family is DNA. I stopped directly behind Julian. He was sitting like a stone statue, his gaze fixed on the screen. Ready for the final reveal, I whispered. I pressed the button. Click. Slide 3 hit the wall. It was a split screen. On one side was the invoice from Lakeside Fertility, detailing the $24,000 payment for IVF and prenatal care. On the other side was a document with the header Genomic Analysis Report. I was curious, I said, addressing the room. When I found the receipt for the IVF, I wondered why go through the trouble and expense of in vitro fertilization if you two are seemingly healthy? Unless, of course, there was a biological incompatibility or a desire to ensure a specific genetic outcome. I walked over to the table and picked up a small plastic bag. Inside was a black hairbrush. You left this in my guest bathroom 3 weeks ago. Elias, I said, you always were shedding, and Sloan. You drank from a water bottle in my car the day you accidentally left your receipt. It is amazing what a private lab can do with a little saliva and a hair follicle in 48 hours. I pointed to the screen. Probability of paternity 99.9%, I read aloud. Father Elias Thorne, Mother Sloan Vane. The room went dead silent. I turned to Julian. He was trembling, not with fear, but with the effort of holding back a scream. Julian, I said softly, do you see that date on the conception timeline? It aligns perfectly with the week you were in New York for that conference. The week Sloan said she was visiting her mother. I leaned in closer to him. Julian, did you know your wife is carrying my husband's child? Sloan slammed her hands onto the table, knocking over her wine glass. The red liquid spilled across the white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. Turn it off, she screamed, leaping to her feet. Stop it, Julian. Do not listen to her. She is lying. She forged it. She is jealous because she is barren. She is a dried-up, bitter witch who can't give her husband a family. The insult hung in the air, ugly and raw. She had gone for the throat. She had targeted my deepest trauma, my inability to have children, weaponizing it to save her own skin, but she didn't know that the wound had cauterized long ago. Julian stood up. He moved slowly, deliberately. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at his wife. Barren, Julian asked. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly so. She is broken. Julian, Sloan cried, grabbing his lapels. That is why Elias came to me. He needed a real woman. We did this for us. We were going to have a baby. And with Elias's money, we could have had everything. Julian looked down at her hands on his jacket. He reached up and peeled her fingers off him, one by one, with a look of utter revulsion. I have known for 3 days, Julian said. Sloan froze. What? Amara told me, Julian said. But I didn't want to believe it. Not fully. I told myself maybe there was a mistake. Maybe it was a donor. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. But then I checked your laptop, he continued. I saw the emails where you called me the mule. I saw the messages where you and Elias laughed about how easy it was to fool me. He pulled out a folded document. You want a family. Sloan, Julian asked. You have one. You have Elias. You deserve each other. He threw the document onto the table. It landed in the puddle of spilled wine, the edges turning pink. Those are divorce papers, Julian said. I filed them this morning. I am citing adultery and fraud, and I've already spoken to the eviction court. You have 24 hours to get your things out of my house. I'm changing the locks tomorrow at noon. Julian, no, Sloan gasped, clutching her stomach. You can't. I am pregnant. I have nowhere to go. Go to hell, Julian said. Or go to Miami. I don't care. Just get out of my life. Enough. Elias roared. He had snapped. The humiliation, the exposure, the loss of control, it was too much. He lunged across the space between us, his eyes wild, aiming for the remote control in my hand. "Give me that," he shouted. "I am going to smash that projector, I'm going to." He never reached me. The 2 security guards I had hired, who had been standing stoically by the kitchen door, moved with the speed of trained professionals. One of them, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, stepped forward and caught Elias by the chest. He didn't strike him. He just stopped him. It was like watching a bird fly into a concrete wall. "Step back. Mister Thorne," the guard rumbled. Elias stumbled back, gasping for breath, clutching his chest. "Get your hands off me. This is my house." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "it is not." I walked to the sideboard and picked up the heavy manila folder I had prepared. The folder, it was 3 inches thick. It contained the weight of their destruction. I walked back to the table and threw it down. It hit the wood with a sound like a gavel striking a bench. Thwack! "This," I said, my voice ringing with finality, "is my apology." Elias stared at the folder. "What?" "You demanded I apologize," I said. "You gave me an ultimatum, so here it is." I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the surface, looking him dead in the eye. "I apologize, Elias," I said. "I apologize for being so busy building our fortune that I didn't notice you stealing it. I apologize for trusting you with my heart when I should have been checking your credit score. And I sincerely apologize for not sending you and your whore to prison 6 months ago." Elias flinched as if I had slapped him. "Inside that folder," I continued, pointing a manicured finger at the stack, "you will find a copy of the divorce petition. It has already been filed electronically. You will find the forensic accounting audit proving you embezzled $1.5 million. You will find the affidavit from the notary you bribed to forge my signature on the Aspen mortgage." I turned to Sloan, who was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "And for you, Sloan," I said, "there is a criminal complaint for intellectual property theft, courtesy of Julian, and a civil suit from me for alienation of affection and fraud." "You can't prove any of this," Elias stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "It is all circumstantial. I will get a lawyer. I will drag you through court for years. I will take half the company." "You will take nothing," I cut him off. "Because 20 minutes ago, I met with Arthur Sterling and the board of OmniStream. I showed them your corporate credit card statements. The vacations, the dinners, the consulting fees to S Ventures." Elias went white. You went to the board. They fired you. Elias." I smiled. "Effective immediately. Your company phone has already been remotely wiped. Your keycard has been deactivated, and their legal team is currently drafting a grand larceny charge against you." I looked at Sloan. She looked small, pathetic, the truest version of herself. "You wanted my position, didn't you, Sloan?" I asked. "You wanted to be Mrs. Thorne. You wanted the penthouse and the black card, and the status." I gestured around the room. "Well, congratulations," I said. "You can have him. You just inherited a man with no job, a pending felony conviction, and 0 assets. And you—" I picked up the wine bottle and poured myself a glass, my hand perfectly steady. "You just inherited a debt of $1.5 million, I said, "because the IRS and the fraud investigators are going to come looking for that money. And since Ventures is in your name, guess who is liable?" Sloan let out a wail of pure despair. She collapsed into her chair, burying her face in the tablecloth. "Police!" The shout came from the front hallway. The heavy thud of boots on hardwood echoed through the penthouse. "In here," I called out calmly. Elias looked at the door. He looked at the window, briefly considering a run for it, but we were 40 floors up. There was nowhere to go. "Amara," he pleaded, tears finally spilling from his eyes. "Please, don't let them take me. I can fix this. I can pay it back. I love you." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had married, the man I had planned to grow old with, and I felt Nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was the cold satisfaction of a job finished. "You don't love me, Elias," I said, taking a sip of the wine. "You love my money, and unfortunately for you, the bank is closed." Two uniformed officers stepped into the dining room, followed by a detective in a cheap suit. "Elias Thorne?" the detective asked. Elias slumped. His posture collapsed, his spine turning to water. "Yes, you are under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, and embezzlement," the detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Elias turned slowly as the metal cuffs clicked shut on his wrists. He looked over his shoulder at me. "You planned this," he whispered. "The whole dinner, the apology. You planned it all. I am a project manager." "Elias," I said, watching them pat him down. "I specialize in controlled demolitions." I turned to Sloan. She was staring at the officers with terror. "And Ms. Vane," the detective said, "we have a warrant for you as well. Conspiracy to commit fraud and theft of intellectual property." "No," Sloan screamed as an officer approached her. "I am pregnant. You can't arrest a pregnant woman." "We have a medical wing at the county jail, ma'am," the officer said impassively, pulling her arms back. As they dragged them both toward the door, Elias weeping silently, Sloan shrieking like a banshee. Julian walked over to me. He stood next to me, watching his wife being led away in handcuffs. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I took another sip of wine. It tasted like victory. "I am better than okay. Julian," I said, "I am single." The front door slammed shut, cutting off Sloan's screams. The silence rushed back into the room. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was clean. I looked at the mess on the table, the spilled wine, the divorce papers, the uneaten lobster. "Well," I said to Julian, "I suppose we should skip dessert." The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers strobed against the limestone facade of my building, turning the quiet, tree-lined street into a chaotic stage. Neighbors were already gathering on the sidewalks, their phones raised like votive candles, recording the downfall of the golden couple. I stood on the balcony of the penthouse, watching the scene unfold below with a glass of vintage red wine in my hand. It felt like watching an ant farm that someone had just shaken violently. Down on the pavement, the drama was reaching its crescendo. Elias was being guided into the back of a squad car, his head pushed down by the officer to protect it from the frame. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for 5 years had evaporated, leaving behind a terrified man in a wrinkled suit. But the real performance was happening a few feet away. Sloan was not going quietly. She was hysterical, her floral dress disheveled, her mascara creating black tear tracks down her face. As the officers tried to steer her toward the second vehicle, she spotted Julian walking down the front steps of the building. Julian was carrying a small duffel bag. He walked with a steady, rhythmic pace, his eyes fixed on the horizon, ignoring the spectacle. "Julian," Sloan screamed, thrashing against the officer's grip. "Julian, please do not let them take me. I am carrying a baby, Julian. Help me." Her voice was raw, scraping against the night air. It was the sound of a woman who had never faced a consequence in her life suddenly facing them all at once. Julian stopped. He paused on the sidewalk, just 10 feet away from her. He turned his head slowly. The streetlights caught the reflection of his glasses, hiding his eyes. "Julian, baby, please," Sloan sobbed, seeing him stop. "I am sorry, I will fix it. Just call a lawyer. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I am your wife." Julian looked at her. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the police officer holding her arm. "I do not have a wife," Julian said. His voice was not loud, but in the sudden silence between her screams, it carried perfectly. "My wife died the day she sold my life to buy a condo in Miami." "Julian," she shrieked as he turned away. He did not look back. He walked past the police cars, past the neighbors whispering behind their hands, and down the street into the darkness. He walked away a free man, leaving her drowning in the mess she had made. The officer finally maneuvered Sloan into the back seat. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed up to my balcony. I took a sip of wine. The show was over. The cleanup was just beginning. 2 weeks later. If you have never seen a reputation destroyed in real time, it is a fascinating, horrifying process. It is like watching a building demolition in slow motion. First the foundation cracks, then the walls buckle, and finally, the whole structure collapses into a cloud of toxic dust. Chicago's business community is a small, incestuous village. Gossip travels faster than fiber optics. By Monday morning, the story of the apology dinner had leaked. By Wednesday, it was the lead story on the local business blogs. Tech executive arrested in $1 million embezzlement scheme. The OmniStream scandal. How one man expensed his affair. Elias was radioactive. OmniStream issued a press release distancing themselves from him so fast it made heads spin. They called his actions rogue behavior and a violation of our core values. He was fired for cause, which meant no severance, no golden parachute, and the immediate forfeiture of his unvested stock options. He was unemployable. I heard through the grapevine that he had tried to call a few headhunters he knew. People he had drunk scotch with for years. They blocked his number. But the social destruction was even more brutal. Sloan became the pariah of the Gold Coast. The mommy bloggers she had desperately tried to impress turned on her with the ferocity of sharks smelling blood. Her Instagram account, once a curated shrine to her perfect lifestyle, was flooded with thousands of comments. Homewrecker, thief, parasite. She had to delete her profile within 48 hours. Then came the legal avalanche. Catherine, my lawyer, was a machine. We filed for an emergency asset freeze the morning after the arrest. The judge granted it immediately given the evidence of flight risk and dissipation of assets. We locked everything, the joint accounts, the cars, the house. Elias was out on bail. His parents had put up their retirement home in Florida to secure his release, but he had no access to cash. He was staying in a cheap motel near the airport, driving a rental car paid for by his mother, when it came time to hire defense counsel for his criminal trial. Elias found himself in a nightmare. The top-tier white-collar defense firms in Chicago require a retainer of at least $50,000. Elias did not have $50. I heard from Catherine that he was forced to hire a lawyer named Saul, a man who worked out of a strip mall in Cicero and mostly handled DUI cases. It was a fitting end for a man who cared so much about image. Sloan was in a similar boat. S.V. Ventures was being audited by the IRS. Since she was the sole proprietor, she was personally liable for the back taxes and penalties on the $1.5 million of unreported income. Her company was dissolved, and her assets were seized. But the real blow, the twist that finally broke them, happened in the lobby of the Cook County Courthouse. It was a Tuesday morning. I was there with Catherine for a preliminary hearing on the civil suit. Elias and Sloan were there for their criminal arraignment. I saw them across the lobby. They looked haggard. Elias had lost weight. His suit hung loosely on his frame. Sloan looked pale and sickly, her roots showing, her designer clothes replaced by sweatpants. They were standing apart, not touching, radiating a sullen hostility toward each other. Then, Sloan's phone rang. It was her doctor. I was standing close enough to hear the conversation, or rather, the shouting match that followed. Sloan listened for a moment, her face crumbling. She hung up and looked at Elias. "The amniocentesis results came back," she whispered. Elias looked up, a flicker of hope in his dead eyes. He still thought the baby was his ticket. He still thought that maybe, just maybe, if he had a biological connection to the Kingswell fortune via some twisted legal loophole, he could salvage something. "And," Elias asked, "is it a boy? Is the genetic profile healthy?" Sloan started to cry. "There are complications. The doctor said the liver development is abnormal, And there are markers for neurological issues. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. They said it is severe. Elias, the baby is going to need round-the-clock care, surgeries, therapy, for life. Elias stared at her. Alcohol. But you said you stopped drinking. I did, Sloan sobbed. Mostly I had a few glasses of wine in the first trimester before I knew for sure. And at the parties, I didn't think it would hurt. The silence between them was terrible. Then, Elias exploded. You stupid cow! He screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls of the courthouse. People stopped. Lawyers, bailiffs, defendants. Everyone turned to watch. You ruined it, Elias roared, advancing on her. You ruined the only thing I had left. That baby was the heir. That baby was supposed to be the key to the trust I needed, a healthy heir to challenge Amara's will, and you pickled it. You poisoned my son with your cheap Pinot Grigio. Elias, stop. Sloan backed away, terrified. It is our baby. How can you talk about him like an asset? Because that is all he was, Elias shouted. Not caring who heard him, he was past the point of caution. He was a man watching his last lifeboat sink. I didn't want a baby. Sloan, I wanted the money. I wanted the Kingswell Trust. And now I am stuck with a felony charge, a broke mistress, and a defective kid that is going to cost me millions I do not have. The brutality of his words was like a physical assault. Sloan stood there, her mouth open, the realization finally hitting her. He had never loved her. He had never wanted a family with her. He had viewed her womb as nothing more than a manufacturing plant for a key to a safe deposit box. You monster, Sloan whispered. I am the monster. Elias laughed. A high, manic sound. You are the one who couldn't put down the bottle for 9 months to secure our future. You are the parasite. Sloan, you drained me dry. You convinced me to forge those documents. This is your fault. My fault, Sloan shrieked, lunging at him. You forged the signature. You came up with the plan. You used me. She clawed at his face. Elias shoved her back hard. She stumbled and fell onto the cold marble floor. Get away from me, Elias spat. I am done. I am done with you. I am done with the brat. I am done with all of it. Hey, a bailiff moved in, grabbing Elias by the shoulder. Knock it off. Separate now. I stood by the security checkpoint, watching them being pulled apart. Sloan was on the floor, weeping hysterically, clutching her stomach. Elias was shouting obscenities, blaming her, blaming me, blaming the world. Catherine leaned over to me. Well, she said dryly, that will certainly help our case for alienation of affection. He just admitted in front of 20 witnesses that he only wanted the child for your trust fund. Make sure we get the transcript of the security footage, I said, adjusting my sunglasses. I want that played at the divorce hearing. I looked at Elias one last time. He was red-faced, foaming at the mouth, looking every inch the failed con artist he was. He caught my eye across the lobby. He stopped struggling. He stared at me, seeing the calm, untouchable woman standing in her tailored suit, flanked by a high-priced lawyer. He looked at Sloan, ruined and weeping on the floor. And in that moment, he knew. He knew that the castle he had tried to build on the sand of lies had not just washed away. I had kicked it over, and now I was watching him drown in the tide. I turned to Catherine. Let's go, I said. I have a business to run, and I think I'm going to buy a new car today. The Audi smells like bad decisions. We walked out of the courthouse, leaving the screams of my ex-husband and his mistress echoing in the Hall of Justice. The nightmare was over. The sun was shining on Chicago, and the air tasted crisp and clean. It tasted like freedom. The seasons in Chicago are distinct, aggressive, and unapologetic, much like the city itself. 1 year has passed since the dinner party that dismantled my previous life. It is spring now. The ice on Lake Michigan has fractured and melted, dissolving into the deep, churning blue water. The wind that whips down the magnificent mile no longer carries the bite of winter. It carries the scent of damp earth and new beginnings. I sat in my new office, swiveling my chair to look out at the skyline. I had moved Kingswell Interiors out of the old building. I needed a space that did not hold the ghosts of phone calls I had overheard, or late nights spent wondering where my husband was. My new headquarters was in the West Loop, an industrial chic loft with exposed brick and massive windows that flooded the room with light. It was a space designed for clarity. My desk was clean. The binders of evidence, the forensic audits, the divorce decrees, they were all filed away in storage. Gathering dust. They were historical documents now, not active weapons. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. It was a brutal, protracted battle, but Catherine had been relentless. Because we had proven fraud and the dissipation of marital assets, the judge had been incredibly unsympathetic to Elias. I recovered the bulk of the $1.5 million. The court had ordered the liquidation of every asset Elias and Sloan had tried to hide: the Miami condo deposit, the jewelry, the car. It wasn't a full recovery. Of course, some money had been spent on flights and dinners that could never be refunded, but I had my company, I had my family trust, and most importantly, I had my dignity. I took a sip of herbal tea, letting the warmth settle in my chest. I thought about where they were now. It was not something I dwelt on often, but today was the anniversary of the day I found the receipt in the trash. So my mind drifted back to the wreckage. Elias was currently inmate number 4829 at a minimum security correctional center in downstate Illinois. He had pleaded guilty to wire fraud and tax evasion in exchange for a lighter sentence. 3 years. He was 1 year in. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he was working in the prison library, shelving books. It seemed fitting. He was finally surrounded by stories, but none of them were his own. He had lost his license to practice marketing, if such a thing existed, and his reputation was so thoroughly scorched that he would likely never work in corporate America again. And Sloan, I had seen her once, about 2 months ago. I was driving through a suburb on the outskirts of the city, taking a shortcut to a site visit. I stopped at a drive-thru for a coffee. When the window opened, she was there. She looked 20 years older. The glamour was gone. The blonde hair was tied back in a messy, practical bun, the roots dark and grown out. Her face was lined with exhaustion. She was wearing a uniform with a name tag that hung crookedly on her chest. She handed me the coffee without looking up, her eyes dull and focused on the register screen. She did not recognize me behind my sunglasses and the tinted window of my new Range Rover. I drove away without saying a word. I knew her situation. Julian had told me. She was living in a small, cramped apartment, working double shifts to pay off the IRS garnishments and the restitution orders. She was raising the baby alone. The boy was born with the complications the doctors had predicted. He needed therapy, medication, and constant care. Sloan was finally doing the one thing she had avoided her entire life. She was taking responsibility. She was working hard, not for luxury, but for survival. It was a harsh punishment, but it was one she had written for herself. My phone buzzed on the desk, snapping me out of my reverie. It was a text from Julian. Meeting at the planetarium in 20 minutes. The weather is too good to waste. I smiled. A genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. I am on my way. I typed back. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the office. My staff nodded as I passed. Have a good afternoon. Amara. My assistant called out. She was a new hire, bright and loyal. She didn't know the old Amara, the one who walked on eggshells. She only knew this version, the one who walked with purpose. I drove to the lakefront. The parking lot near the Adler Planetarium was full of tourists and runners, soaking up the rare sunshine. I spotted Julian sitting on a concrete bench near the water's edge, sketching in a notebook. He looked different. The heaviness that used to crush his shoulders was gone. He was wearing a casual navy windbreaker and jeans, his hair cut shorter, sharper. He looked younger. He looked like the man he was supposed to be before Sloan had turned him into a mule. I walked up behind him. Designing another skyscraper, Mr. Vane. Julian looked up, squinting against the sun. His face broke into a grin. Nothing that ambitious. Just a garden pavilion for a client in Oak Park. Small scale, high detail. He closed the notebook and stood up. We didn't hug immediately. There was a quiet, comfortable distance between us. We started walking along the path, the sound of the waves crashing against the concrete acting as a rhythm to our steps. "How is the new studio?" I asked. "Busy," Julian said. "In a good way. I have 3 projects lined up for the summer, and the best part, nobody is selling my designs out the back door. The profit margins are actually making sense for the first time in 5 years." He laughed, a light, airy sound that drifted away on the wind. "I actually hired a junior associate last week, a kid fresh out of college. I am terrified I'm going to turn into a tyrant boss, so I bring donuts every morning to compensate." "You could never be a tyrant, Julian," I said. "You are too decent." "Decency is a learned skill," he said, looking at the water. "I think I used to confuse decency with weakness. I thought if I just gave more, forgave more, it would fix things. I learned the hard way that sometimes the most decent thing you can do is draw a line." "Amen to that," I murmured. We walked in silence for a while. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the companionable silence of 2 veterans who had fought in the same war and made it out alive. We didn't need to talk about the war anymore. We knew the scars were there, but they had faded into silver lines that only we could see. "Have you heard from her?" Julian asked, his voice careful. "I saw her working," I said. "But no, I haven't spoken to her. Have you?" "No," Julian shook his head. "My lawyer handles the child support payments. I send a check every month. Not because I have to, the DNA proved it isn't mine, but because the kid is innocent. He didn't ask to be part of their scheme. I send enough to make sure he has his meds. But that is it. That is the extent of my involvement." I looked at him with admiration. Even after everything, after the theft and the humiliation, he still had a kindness in him. He wasn't bitter. He was just boundaries. "You are a good man, Julian," I said. He stopped walking and turned to face me. The wind ruffled his hair. He looked at me with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat, not out of fear, but out of possibility. "And you are a formidable woman, Amara," he said. "You saved my life. You know, if you hadn't called me that day, if you hadn't met me at that coffee shop, I would still be drowning. I would still be thinking I was the failure." "We saved each other," I corrected him. He smiled, and his hand brushed against mine. It was a tentative touch, electric and warm. "So," he said, shifting the tone, "I was thinking, since we are both free agents now, and since we both have excellent taste in architecture, maybe you would like to come to see the site for the pavilion afterward. There is this Italian place nearby that does not serve betrayal with the pasta." I laughed. It felt good to laugh. "I would like that very much." We weren't rushing. There was no desperate need to fill the void left by our ex-spouses. We were taking it slow. We were building a foundation first, checking the soil, pouring the concrete, making sure everything was level before we even thought about framing the walls. We were architects. After all, we knew that anything built to last required patience. As we turned to walk back toward the car, my phone buzzed in my bag. I ignored it at first, but it buzzed again, and again. I stopped and pulled it out. The screen lit up. It was a text message from an unknown number. The area code was from downstate Illinois. I opened the message. To Amara. "From unknown, I am sorry. I sit here every day, and I think about what I threw away. I was stupid. I was greedy. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I broke it. I know I don't deserve a response, but I just wanted you to know. I am sorry." I stared at the words. A year ago. This message would have destroyed me. It would have made me cry, or scream, or doubt myself. A year ago. I might have read into it, looked for the remorse, wondered if he really meant it. But today, I just read the words as they were, text on a screen, pixels of light arranging themselves into a plea from a man who only discovered his conscience when he lost his freedom. He wasn't sorry he hurt me. He was sorry he was in prison. He was sorry he wasn't eating lobster in Miami. He was sorry his gamble hadn't paid off. I felt Julian watching me. "Everything okay?" he asked. I looked up at him. The sun was behind him, creating a halo of light. "Yes," I said. "Just spam." I looked back at the screen. I didn't type a reply. I didn't save the number. I didn't take a screenshot for my records. The time for record keeping was over. My thumb hovered over the conversation. Delete thread, I tapped S. Block caller, I tapped yes. The message vanished. The digital tether was severed. I dropped the phone back into my bag. I didn't check to see if it landed face up or face down. I didn't care. "Ready?" I asked Julian. "Ready," he said. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the fresh, cool air of the lake. I looked out at the horizon, where the water met the sky in a seamless line of blue. The world was vast, and it was open, and for the first time in a long time, it belonged to me. I smiled, looped my arm through Julian's, and we turned our backs on the city skyline, walking toward the parking lot, toward dinner, toward the future. I didn't apologize to them, and it was the best decision of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope you enjoyed Amara's journey from betrayal to absolute victory. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you tuning in from New York, London, Sydney, or somewhere else entirely? Let's chat in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Scarlet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel, and smash that hype button so this video can reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next story.